All right, so I'm going to start the recording. Before we get into week 2 stuff, those of you that are struggling to get through GitHub's student developer pack authentication, blah, 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 send me an email and I will send you back a letter. It to be like immediate, and then submit another and another and another. That's causing problems. So if you need a verification letter that you're enrolled in the class, whatever, just shoot me an email. I will respond back with a PDF, upload that. It takes about 4 days. You do not have to have that to keep moving in the class. All right. The stuff that we're using for GitHub Developer Pack doesn't come into play till after week 8. So you have time. Create a GitHub account because you will need that here in the near future. But to get the student developer pack, you don't really need that till about week 8. I just put it in the first week because sometimes it takes 3 weeks for people to get through verification. All right. So if you need something, or if you need a letter from me, just email me and I have a template. I can just slap your name in it and away it goes. Okay. So for this week, what we were planning on talking about is OOP, or object-oriented programming, and then kind of jump starting into APIs. So as a recap on OOP, there's a link out here. You guys should remember this from INF601, if you took INF601. That talks about what object-oriented programming is and how that's different than just standard scripting. So definitely go back through, look at it. The idea is that you're going to deal with classes and objects of an instance, right? So we're actually going to put this to use in API. It's easier for me to show you in an API. But the idea is that an object can have multiple functions within it, and it's only information pertinent to that object. So an object is some form of an entity. So if you look at some of these in here, they call it as classes. So if we in Python call this class dog, then dog is our class. That is an object. And then we can have things relevant to that dog. So it may have attributes, AKA a bunch of values that are pertinent to a dog. It could have functions that are pertinent to that dog and only pertinent to that object. All right. Then you create an instance of that. If I create an instance of a dog that is called Sam, then Sam has all the attributes available off of him. He has all the functions available off of him. All right. That's kind of the most oversimplification of object-oriented programming. But the idea is that you are building an object and it has a bunch of functions and attributes associated with it. All right. So read back through this first one here. Make sure you're familiar with how it works. Play with it a little bit. The gist of it in this class is that you will write some object-oriented programming, but it's you consuming object-oriented programming that really happens in this class, right? So if we're in Django and we're talking about an instance of a template, as an object of a template, what all functions correlate with that template, what all attributes does a template have, that kind of stuff. That's the OOP you guys will decipher. All right. So recap OOP. And then the next part is all about APIs. So for this week and next week, there won't be a homework assignment per se, right? It'll be, I believe, week 4 is actually when you guys will have your first homework assignment. Let me double check. Yes, that's in week 4. So what I really want you guys to do is start playing with PyCharm, right? I don't need homework assignments from you guys to really start building out projects, start playing with it just so you have an idea of how it works. Today, what we're going to do is load up some API and then explain how APIs work. All right. So APIs in general, those are an application programming interface, right? And the idea is that somebody's got some web application and you want to code against it or you want to retrieve data from it. And so you will use a couple different forms of an API. It could be a native API, meaning that they wrote Python code specifically for accessing their API, right? So if you looked at, say, Spotify, right? Everybody knows what Spotify is, all right? You got this music service. If you want to interact with your Spotify account, you may want to use some kind of Spotify package to do that. So if we do Spotify Python, you will see that there's one called Spotify. And Spotify is a package that you download and install, right? It's through a pip install. And once you get it installed, then you can use a couple pieces of code and you can access that API with a Python native module, okay? Some APIs are going to use what's called a REST API. And that means that you're going to use web requests in order to pull that information back down to you. It's usually downloaded to you in the form of a JSON type structure. And JSON type structures mimic what in Python? What kind of data type?
That was the question.
So a JSON structure mimics very similar to what in Python? Dictionaries, right? They're very, very similar. So you can import the JSON module, you can convert that over to a true dictionary, and it pretty much aligns exactly like it. So it's very easy to import stuff from JSON into Python because it mimics the entire dictionary structure of Python.
Kind of like importing like a C++ library, or they kind of follow those same.
Similar to it, yeah.
Like you'll import the library and I'll have a bunch of functions.
Right. So if you import JSON, you have JSON.load, JSON.save, so that you can import and flow between JSON type objects.
Okay, that makes sense.
But most APIs will send something back to you in the form of JSON, which is very, very similar to a dictionary. And so you can work with it in Python. So one of the links out here off of this week's section is Rapid API. Again, Rapid API is just where I send students that are trying to figure out what API do they want to start playing with and understand it. Rapid API is basically a hub of all APIs that are on the internet. Not all of them, but it's intended to be. And it could either be a free API or it could be one that you pay for, one or the other. Okay. In our case, we want to obviously play with the free versions that are out there so that you can do a lot of requests and it doesn't cost you any money. So did anybody take the time to find a API they wanted to play with? Yes. We'll start because I'm going to go around and just grab a bunch of these.
It's just called Live Sports Odds.
Okay. Is that one off of Rapid?
Yeah, it's the free one.
Live Sport? Okay.
It's like the biggest sports one on there.
So let's see here.
Yeah,
API.
it said it was free.
I know there was a link for it. All right, so you'll go out, you'll create an account and get signed up. I'm going to convert this over to my other one. Okay, so you said, what was the name of it again?
Live Sports Odds.
Oh, Live Sports Odds. Yep, we did that last semester. Okay. So this API, what's nice about this is you can see what it's all about and how it operates. So it has endpoints for NFL, NBA, AFL, etc. across the board so that you can get the live sports odds for soccer, basketball, etc. All right. Over here on the left-hand side, you're going to get the GET requests over here. So this is going to be more of a REST API that you're going to interact with. So you will be polling for a website. If you click on V4 Sports, you can then get a dictionary or a explanation in the center here. Let me zoom out a little bit. And in this middle point, it will use a sports key as a required thing that you have to send up. So in this header parameter, you're going to be sending that. And down below, you can tell it whether you want all parameters, maybe you want that true, false. It has documentation as to what this all means. So if we test this endpoint, this will pull back information. And over here on the right-hand side, we can see in the results that we got a 200. So most of you have taken web, right? Or at least understand what a 200 is in HTML or in HTTP. Does everybody remember what a 200 response code is? All's good in the hood.
Okay.
All right. 200 means everything was successful. It all worked.
Okay.
If we get a 404, does anybody know what 404 is? Page not found, object not found, which means you're not getting any connection there. And then there's a whole series of different HTML codes of responses. So you guys should be able to go look those up. If we look up here and just do a search for HTTP codes, right? List of HTTP status codes. You're going to get a whole slew of them inside of here. So you have hundreds, 200s, 300s, 400s. Obviously have a link to that. So we're just going to copy and put that right into Blackboard so that you guys have a direct link. HTTP status codes. There we go. Okay. So let me pull back up my other browser. Not that one. That one. Here. Okay. So this one only has a couple different endpoints. You can call sports to get a list of basically all the sports that come back. So if we look over here on the right, we can see what came back. We started off with a dictionary, right? So we got a list of all this. And in that list, we got essentially a list of dictionaries. Each dictionary contains the key, the group, the title of whatever it is, the description of what it is, and whether it's currently active and has outrights. Okay, this is just attributes that come back based on this GET request of sports. So what this GET request would do is return to you all the different sports that this bookmaker has available to it, right? You'll see this as a whole slew of dictionaries, and you're going to see that they are currently supporting 99 different sports. All right, does everybody see how I see that on the screen here? Now, if we go to code snippets and we change this drop down to Python, you're going to see there's two different ways to set up these type of requests in Python. You can use http.client, or you can use the request module, either one of those two. All right. Remember, request module, if we look at that code, we have to build out the headers, the URL we want to connect to, and then we would get the response back as a URL and headers and all the queries that come back. All right, it comes back as JSON. If we look at HTTP client, you can see that it's structured very similarly, except for it uses an HTTP client connection going out there. All right, doesn't matter which one you use. We will primarily use the request module in order to pull that out. So if we want to play with this one, I'm going to copy this code, just hit copy code. Let's go out to our PyCharm and we'll create a new project. And we're going to call this sports bet for the lack of it, right? I hit enter, I say this window. Now you guys are going to see my API key up here. Please don't be stupid with it, okay? Like, I know I'm being recorded, but I'm saying don't use my API key to go do stuff. All right. I'll kill it when I get done here, but just so you know. So what does this do? If we look at this code, we can see we're going out to this particular URL. This is considered our endpoint. So if we go back and look at our documentation, we have 3 endpoints over here on the left, right? We have a list of all the sports, right? Returns a list of all available sports. If we click on this one, it's going to get us the odds, but it requires that we give it a specific sport, right? And then we have scores, and this one is going to give us back all the different scores for everything that comes out of there. Okay. So if we just want to get a list of sports for now, then we can go back to PyCharm, right? This is our endpoint URL. On this query string, we want it all, right? So again, if we look at our documentation, you can see on the optional parameters, we can set all to true, or we can set it to false, or don't include it at all, right? It's optional in what we set. We want to set it to true so that we get everything back. In our headers, we have to pass in our API key, and we pass in the host that we want to connect to. All right. Where do I get that information? Again, that's back down here. You can get your key, which your guys' key should be different, right? And then we can click on our API host, and then we can get this example going out. All right. So I click over here. I see this. We're going to get a response back in which we're going to use the request module to do a .get. We're going to pass in the URL, which is up above. We're going to pass in our headers, and we're going to pass in any parameters as our query string. That will do a response back. And then we're going to convert whatever that response is to JSON using .json. So if we were to print this and run it, you will see no module name requests, right? Why does that not work?
You haven't pip installed it.
Right. We have to pip install request for this to get started. So if I move this out of the way so we can see this, we can go down to our Python packages and we could do a search and install requests here, or we can go to the terminal, make sure you are in your own virtual environment, which should have automatically got created when you created the project. And we would do something like pip install requests. Notice that it's a red squiggly mark up here, which says that it's not installed, right? You could also click right here on install packages and it would take care for it right easily. Either way is acceptable how you go about it. Notice that now that it's installed, the red squiggly goes away. We can go ahead and hit run again. And you can see we get this massive list over here, and we would have to scroll clear to the right to go off and see that. All right. So the better way for this to print out and make sure that we got results, it would be something like for sport in response dot JSON print sport. And if I run that, you can see that it puts each one of those on a line so we can kind of see what's going on, right? So we can see that in this list, it's going to print this out. Actually, instead of this line, we just want our for loop. So let's run that. There you go. And each one of these is on its own individual line. We have a key, and that key comes up as the ID. So this is the ID. If we wanted to pull sports bets, this is the ID that we would have to pass in.
We would take that ID and kick it back into the website or.
Right. So we take this ID, and that is what we would use inside sports odds, right? And odds requires that we pass in a sport, which would be that key that we would pull out of that ID. All right. And then on regions, we can determine if we want US and all these other options. So this is always the documentation you want to come back to for whatever you're using. You'll notice in optional parameters, there is a whole lot of optional parameters. We can set the type of format, whether we want decimal or an American version, or if we want markets, we can tell it what markets we are caring about, the spreads, the totals, whatever we want. Okay, and this is a comma delimited one, so we set all this up. So with all of this, with this odds, we can then change our request here is this response. We can then call that something else to get that back. So instead of response, we may call this sports, right? In which case this result now becomes sports. So now we can say for sport and sports, we can do that. We may want to clean up this print so that it's not going out. Does anybody remember how to do that with dictionaries in Python? The best way to cleanly print out dictionaries?
There's a pretty print module.
Pretty
isn't
print,
there?
right? So we could use import pretty print. And then instead of printing the sport, we could pretty print dot print.
Too many P's up there.
Too many P's in the hood. There we go. There we go. So we want a pretty print, and we want to print our sport. And if we run that.
Oh.
Does anybody know what I'm missing? It's not print, it's pprint. Pprint. Okay. So it somewhat made it better, but not necessarily, because these are all binary that are coming out of there. That's what the B means. So it's kind of clean, but not clean. Instead of using pretty print, what you should do is format that however you want out with it.
Yeah.
Now, this is all cool, and I can keep running this multiple times, right? But every time I do that, I'm using a request. And some of these APIs only allow you to do so many requests in a day, right? So this one, if we go to about, we can see more details. We go to tutorials. Sometimes they'll have tutorials on how to use that API. This one doesn't. Discussions and on pricing. If we go to pricing, I can do a hard limit of 500 in a month. Well, I already burned probably 6, right? Just testing. So the best way to play with this kind of data is to get the output of the original one. So if I just say print sports and run that, and I did not get sports.json, right? So we had to do .json.
Did that waste another 10
It did.
30 of 7?
Yep. So there we go. Now we have this giant list of code back. I may want to take that, maybe create a new Python file up here, new Python file, and call this data, right? And then dump this in. Now I can massage this so that I can see what a response would be until I get at the format structure without having to do 900 requests.
Oh, gotcha.
All right.
Smart.
So do the first one, get back your info so you know what you can pull out. Now, right now we're just dealing with this as Python data as a dictionary and a bunch of lists. You may want to store this in a database so that it's easier for you to retrieve, right? That's like step 10 kind of thing. This is just so you can start playing with the data. So all we really care about is all these keys, right? So what we could do with this data that we're storing out is sports, and we want to call it sports.json. Maybe we want just the list of sports and all the extra fluff that goes along with that. Then we would tell it to print specific fields. So if you guys remember how to use dictionaries, if we look at this data, we have a key of this, a group of American football, title, description, active. So say I just want to get all of the descriptions out of here. So that gives me basically the nice clean names of everything. So then I could say something like for sports.json, and we're going to do back to sport. In this JSON, we want to say sport, and we specifically want to just pull out the description. And if we tell that to be printed so that we get a list of all the descriptions, that should give us a nice clean output of all these descriptions of what's in there. Does everybody see how I did that? All I did was go back and look at our output, grab whichever key that I wanted to get, in this case, the description, because that gave me all the leagues and all that information. Then I can go ahead and just tell it to print that one key out.
So with this, that was like your 9th or 10th attempt for the month, right?
Right.
So rather than, like, you have all your data here, you have your key, right?
Right.
Could you, instead of going through the website, could you just cut out the middleman and use the data from this Python?
Absolutely.
Forwarded?
So now that we pulled this one request, right, we could just store this list as, say, sports equals that, right? And then in our main program, we would import data. And actually, we would do something like from data, import sports. Now we don't have to do all this requesting stuff. We could just block this code out, in which we would use a comment. I'm trying to do a block comment, so I don't have to do it. Just put colons in front. Does anybody remember how to do a block comment?
Hashtag.
Nope.
Hashtag is.
Wrong coding language. You're right, but wrong coding language. You're close.
Triple quotation, isn't it?
Triple quotes. So 3 triple quotes. And then we can put 3 triple quotes around this. And that will comment out all of our request stuff. Now we just say sport.sports.json because we called it sports up here. It's now going to pull that out.
Thank you.
So this is going to pull all that data we stored in the second Python file so that as we're playing, or we're running this rather, not playing, sports.json from data import sports. That should work. Give me a second here. Sports. What's that? See if that saved it. Let's see. List has no attributed JSON. So it's just, that's because it's stored now as a list. So as we have our list, we can just treat it like a list and we do not need this .json part of it, right? And we can run this and there you go. We have all of our code, but it's not going out to the website and doing another request on it. So when you guys are learning to play with stuff, throw up a separate Python file, store it as a variable in here. All we did was store this one as sports. And then in this main file from data import sports, we can play with it from there. All right. Then once you've got all your code that's working well, then turn back on your live data. And therefore you can then have it go out and pull live data. So instead of commenting this out, what we could do is set a variable here called development. So if we say development equals true, then we can do a test here if development eval, why can I not spell it? There we go. That one equals, actually, we don't have to say that. We could just say if development, then we do not execute this code. We run this part down here. And in this case, you could do something like if not development, then execute this code. Right? And we would take out our comments, tab this up. And so what that will do is find out whether or not we have development mode off, right? If development mode's off, it's going to set sports to whatever we get from the outside. Otherwise, we would have else, and then we could have this line here from this, pull this.
Okay.
Does everybody get how that works? We take that out from the top. So we're either going to pull this out from the website if development mode is not true. In this case, if it's set to false. If it is true, then we want to go ahead and just use it from our local data. And it would be best to comment that and say use local data. And on this one, we would say use API, something like that. So documentation will be key on that one. Now, right now we would have development equals true here. In a bigger project, that would be in a config file somewhere, right? We would set an environment variable that says development is equal to true or false. So if we're deploying this on the web, development would equal false, and therefore anything we set up under development would not be executed at that point.
Gotcha.
Which also means if this is down here where we're pulling this stuff, we could even set our import request to only import that if we are in live mode so that it actually doesn't have to import it unless it's true. All right.
Mhm.
Everybody understand APIs so far?
Yeah.
So again, all this is so that we can pull these stats out. Now we need to use one of those specific keys to pull additional data, right? So if we go back and look at our endpoints, and we look at our odds example, and we come over here to our snippet and use Python requests. Now we're going to copy this out. Go back to our PyCharm. Let's come down here. And if we look at this one, the only thing that's different is our query string. And we're specifically saying we want the region of US. It might make sense to make these a little easier to read for us. So we'll do that. Right. And then our headers, we pass in our headers. But the one thing we need to pass in is our sport ID, right? We need to tell it what sport. So sport is upcoming. We go back to our test here. Notice how sport is not listed. Therefore, it's going to pull in everything. Or if we execute this code, it may or may not work. So what we can do is comment this out for now. There we go. Comment with line comment. And then you can turn that off immediately. So if we run this line, you see that we get back every single thing for every single sport that ever came out there, right? We need to specifically tell it what sport ID we want to use. So if we come in here and say, comma, sport, colon, and then we need to feed it a sport. So if we go back over here to data, and if we wanted tennis, for example, we would grab this one, stick that in here. That is a key. Like that. And whoops, that's a colon. Go. Okay. And that gets us that one. Now, if we run this code, we just get the data back for specifically tennis, right? And you'll notice in this sport key, we have ATP open. Actually, it should just be pulling back specific sport. I might have typed this wrong. Give me a chance here. Sport key for which is going in there. So we need to specify sport, not sport key. Example, sport key is what we're after. All right. So we have all these required parameters plus all this optional stuff if we want it in date formats and all that. All of that is what you would tweak inside your top part here and set within your query string. So we get these back, and then of course you can see we get a ton of information, which we would then need to digest that information in some way. So if we specifically look in here, notice in the markets, there's a bunch of sub things inside of here. Now, if you'll notice, this is kind of hard to read when it comes out, right? So what I recommend doing is when you guys are first playing with this, go ahead and load up your Python console, right? And this is a live interpreter over here at the bottom. Copy this line by line as you pull it in. So if I go to requests, actually, if I just pull this whole thing, right? Let's set, instead of printing response equals JSON, let's say results equals response.json. And if I save this, now I have this variable called results, right? Now, if I copy all this, paste it into a live console and hit enter, over here on the right-hand side, I can now see all the variables that are set in this program. So I have headers and I can see what's set there, query string, and I also have my response that comes back. And notice out of response, I have all these different things. What we care about is this variable we called results. And if I click on results, well, now it's in a nice clean format that I can see everything in. And if I branch this one out, well, now it nice and cleanly displays what's going out here. Bookmarks, I can see those individual dictionaries and on down the line. So this is much easier to digest as you're trying to pull through little queries. That makes
Gotcha.
sense?
Mhm.
So, and it's live with the code. So now that I have results, I could say something like, give me results 0, which means give me the first one out of that result. Okay, and that spits it out. And if I close all this back down so I don't have so many open, I could set that to something. So say I go result 1 or my result, doesn't matter what you call it here, equals results 0. Well, now that gives me a variable over here called my result, and I can just see the one result. Right? And then I can see my sports key, right? So if I wanted to do my other query and I use the sports key to go to my query from up above, I could say query string. Actually, just copy this. And instead of sport here, I could put my result. My result, and that is called sports key. Sports key. There we go. And that will backfeed it into our request for the query string. So that now, of course, sport key is not defined, which it should. Oh, that has to be in quotes. My result is sport key. There we go. And I hit the down arrow too many times. Okay, and so now that I did that, I can go ahead and do my re-request up here. So I just copy this line of the response. Pull this over so you can see what I'm doing. What I'm doing is going ahead and reprocessing the query. But this time when I do the query going out there, it's now going to use that specific result sport key. Now, if I look at my response over here, response 200, let's do new result equals response dot JSON, right? JSON, yeah. And if I look over here at new results, I can see only the ones that are specific for that team. So notice what I did was I pulled the sports key for tennis ATP US Open. When I did that new request, now it only gives me the ones that are specific to that particular request. So I know that seems like a lot, but you can use this video to go back and try to figure out how to process an API.
Not to jump the gun,
No.
obviously, I'm assuming, but that all this information that we take from the API, like any data that we receive and we put into a file or whatever we have access to.
Right.
I'm guessing or assuming that we could take that information and instead kick it into a GUI.
Yes. So the idea is you guys know, once you structure this into a dictionary of the information you care about, well, then you can print it and it's on a screen here. But yes, when we get to Flask and Streamlit and all that, we're going to build a UI so it's nice and easy to see this stuff. The goal right now is store everything as a dictionary. Because if you can store stuff as a dictionary, what is the value of a dictionary over a list?
There are dictionaries you can access the elements by just searching for what you want.
Right.
As opposed to indexing it.
So in a list, you just have a key that's always an index number, right?
Yeah.
And you'd have no idea what that index number is. In a dictionary, you can specify what you want the key to be, aka away team, and then all the away team values.
Yeah.
So if you set it up in that structure, then you guys can build out a database later on and set those variables across there. Then you can have a GUI pull that from that. And like Flask, you don't even have to have a dictionary or a full-blown database. You can just pull straight from your dictionary, which is a database of sorts. All right. Okay. Who else had a API on here?
I found one that was kind of similar. Oh gosh, what's it called? I've been fiddling with it a little bit. Come back to it.
Nope, no problem. Anybody else have an API they found? No, it doesn't have to be from Rapid API. If you guys have another project that brought you in here of interest, like Spotify or something else, say it, because then we can kind of go through and look at it.
I have one, but you have to have like an account through the website. I've already got it, so I can, like, if I get the developer key for it, can I just email it to you really quick and you can just use it?
Yeah.
That was fair.
Well, tell me what it is, and that way we're not showing your key all over live. everything. Because this is going to YouTube and all that too, so.
Go into the internet.
But that's another thing you guys could do is pull those kind of keys. We talked about Spotify, right? So this is a different one. Python. This is going to be called Spotify or Spotify, right? So this one, they're going to give you documentation. Now, this is known as read the docs, is a pretty known way of doing every Python package is going to have the same structure and all this documentation. So when you come in here, you're going to look at this one and it says use this as an example. So if I just copy and paste this in, this is what a lot of doing API stuff is all about. Copy and paste an example, tweak the example. So new Python, and we're going to call this one Spotty Stuff. That's literally what you get paid. Yes. It's all about copy paste somebody else's work, put your name on it, right?
Oh, yeah.
I have the API key if you want.
Okay.
It is
Say it out loud.
D-
Say it right into the microphone.
It's a D7.
Do you want me to use yours or do you want me to create one?
You can create. if you really
Okay, send me that because
Okay, so
once I post yours on here, you're gonna have to trash it and get a new one.
okay, go to, if you want to go to start.gg's in, and you, unfortunately, for some reason, you need an account.
What was it called?
Start.gg.
Okay.
And then you'll need an account. Whether or not you have one is, I don't know, what you doing your free time, Jason?
Well,
But basically,
Mow grass.
it'll ask you to give the, you'll log in your account and there's developer settings.
we're already logged in. There we go, logged in. Okay, so create an account. Let's register with an email address,
While you're at it, give me your credit card information.
mail,
There's three
HSU.
magic numbers on the back.
I'll give you the API. key
This is
for
Python,
each.
man. We're gonna generate a fake credit card number. We're not gonna do that.
Dang right.
And I will show you guys how to do that.
Use API to sign up for credit card in your name.
Oh my god.
We've done that in this class
No, no,
before.
Automatically burn your name.
Okay, so we need some kind of password.
Credit score ruiner, 80% run.
Sure. Use Google's strong password. That works for me. Use a birth date. Let's tweak something.
I don't know how this works. I'm literally just moving it as I go, by the way, so I don't know what this access key is gonna do. It should just be able to give you information from any bracket that's on their site.
Okay, so fill that out.
1944.
Yeah, I'm old.
Wow.
No, I'm kidding. I'm not 44.
Damn.
All right. Always fill out legal information when you're filling these out, not your fake stuff, but fake. Now,
Do as he says, not as he
You know
does.
how weird it is nowadays that I'm 21 and I actually can put in my real birthday?
Like you've always done.
all right, so give me a second here. Let me pull up my fake Gmail here.
Make an API that automatically requests to pull all of your money out of the bank at once.
All right. I knew this was gonna be a fun class, but here we go. Wrap it. All right.
Oh, look, it's the Pentagon.api.
How you crash the economy.
All right.
I think as later classes go on with the recording, you're gonna have to throw a disclaimer at the beginning saying, for legal reasons, this is not, we're not actually doing.
Oh, yeah.
Great Depression to any percent.
I don't know. What's my password here? You were supposed to give me.
Oh, no.
I purposely gave this one
It was
stupid.
a strong password.
It was a,
strong.
all right, stop the recording, rewatch. I have no idea. We'll come back to this one. We'll come back.
That's
Google
fine.
passwords. I'm going in to get an API. I need your strongest password.
I thought it would autofocus through Google, but I guess not.
So
It wasn't a credit card. number,
while we're
but-
dealing with this stuff, and I know it's in one of my sections here, and I'm probably jumping like 4 weeks ahead. But we're gonna play with, you can use these APIs to gather some data and do that kind of stuff, right? Real quick, I am gonna show you a Python module called Faker. Faker's pretty
Ooh.
fun, right? So there again, pull up the documentation. Faker is a Python package that will allow you to fake a bunch of data. All right.
Really?
So as we pull it up here, let's just create a new file in our handy dandy little project, and we're gonna call it
This is super messy.
cool stuff.
Cool stuff.
All right. So cool stuff. We need to import a Python package called Faker. So pip install. Faker. All right.
Can you generate fake social security numbers for this? Asking for a friend.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Those online looking at me smile right now. So the reason that this is a cool tool is one, yes, you can do a lot of things with it, but if you are trying to build out a website or you're trying to build out a web application, right? And you can create 40 different people and you have to get their names and their phone numbers. And you're like, "Ugh, this is annoying. I just want to test my data, right?
Oh.
Use Python Faker in order to generate 50 different people for you. And it will generate everything you need them to generate. So if I come in here and do Faker and then I do Faker.Faker, we're just going to copy this out.
Too much power.
It is fun. Okay. Whoops, that is not in the right spot. Up here. All right. So now I have Faker installed. Now I have fake, right? And fake is just a variable that I can use whatever I want. Now, by default, that's just going to generate a person. So if I want to figure out what this fake.name is, it's going to generate me a fake.name. And it would be helpful if I printed that.
I did it.
So name equals fake.name. And then I could do a print name, right? Run. And it didn't print it. Why didn't it print it? Sports bet. Oh, I'm on the wrong one. This needs to be run my local one here. Right click on cool stuff, go to run cool stuff, and then it runs cool stuff. There we go. Andrew Short. I thought it said snort. If we hit play again, you can see we get Joseph Ross. Do it again, you get Noah Ashley, etc. So every time you run this, you could do that. So does anybody know how I could get 10 of these real fast?
For
People remember Python 360. I love it. All right, so for I in
range 0.
range.
Well, parentheses 0, comma 11.
There you go. Because why?
It will go to from 0 to n-1.
Okay.
Or from
So we run
A to
this,
B-1, I guess.
and you can see that it is going to go ahead and generate me 10 fake names, right?
My
So
gosh.
it's really, really powerful. You can have it generate names, addresses, a bunch of fake text if you want. Just like it demonstrates here, you can demonstrate a whole bunch of names. But what's real cool is you can pull in providers, and those providers are allow you to get things that are more specific. So standard providers in here are things like bank, right? And on bank, I want to generate a bank country, a bank account number, a bank international number, and I can generate all sorts of fake information coming out of here, right? If I generate a fake person,
There you go.
so if I generate this fake person, I can get first names, last names of a female, male, a non-binary names that would come through here, whatever you want it to generate. It will generate everything. Phone numbers, passport numbers, blah. All right.
Can you do banks? Can you do national reserves?
So your question before was, can you generate credit card numbers? Yes, it will generate a whole series of credit card numbers, expiration dates. So obviously this is a lot of information. Please do not use this for nefarious reasons. But you could use credit card full, which then gives you back a dictionary of the name, or in other words, what type of card, the name of the person, the credit card number, the expiration date, and the CVC code. Right. Now, don't go causing problems. The whole point of me showing you this information, and I have to preface this every single time, is so you can generate fake data for your web applications, right?
Well, and like for like D&D and stuff like that, you need an NPC to just pull this up and just
There you
write
go.
some info, and you can give background to something.
So you can get a ton of information, social security numbers, you can generate that.
Make a passport.
Phone numbers, it'll generate phone numbers, but it'll ask for what country, because you know, phone numbers are marketed differently. So like here, it generates extensions and everything else. It's really cool if you're mocking up a website and you need to have 20 staff, call for 20 different things, it automatically spits it up in the screen and gets you the fake data. So from the very beginning, I show everybody how to fake generate data. And as you know, you can do it, but Lorem Ipsum only works so well. This will generate that. If you need a profile for a fake person, boom, profile for fake person, it pops up. Just like ChatGPT would if you asked it for that, right? So anyway, Faker, really cool tool as it goes through there.
Faker walks so ChatGPT could run.
Pretty much, yeah. It's using it under the hood kind of thing. You can use the providers. Again, this is the standard ones. You could also use community ones. So if you wanted to use like credit score and it generates a bunch of fake credit score stuff, There's a whole bunch of fake things that it can create here. You know, vehicle, get you a year, make, model. Localized providers, you can see where it'll generate a bunch of these based on who that person is and what they are. There was another cool one that I went to. A lot of people will use this if they're using Python tests, right? So you want to test your application with a bunch of data, make sure that everything's working like you would expect it to. You could have it pull it up and put it in there. Yeah, so Faker, use it to generate some fake data if you need to as you're going through and testing your stuff. Now, with your API, I want to make sure you're actually pulling data from a source. But if you're building a web application and you need to test stuff, have it generate stuff, store it in a separate Python file, right? Just like I showed you here. So as you have it generate 10, 20 different people, then create a file over here called data and create a new line. I think I just broke my stuff that did that, but yeah, it's fine. Yep. There we go. Create a new line that's called people, and this people is equal to faker dot and then generate 10 different fake people, right? That way you can store fake people. Now it's in your data file. All I have to do is come over here to the file I'm playing with and say from data, import fake people or whatever you called that variable, and you can start using all those fake people out of that list. Everybody see how that worked and why the benefit is and what we're doing that for? It's pretty cool.
When you import that data file, just out of curiosity, do you have to like select individual items from that data file, or can you just import the whole
You can
file?
import the whole thing, but then it's how you reference it, right? So if I import data, now anywhere I want to use, say, data dot sports, right? I have to say data dot sports in order to pull that across. So this is if you just wanted one piece of that data, then use from data, import whatever. If you want to import your entire data so that you have access to every single one of these, then import the whole package. The other way to do that is you could do from data, import star, and then you don't have to reference data dot whatever. It's just automatically there. So if I call sports, notice how sports pulls right up. So any one of those ways makes sense. If you have a bunch of stuff out of your data, it's probably easier to import data than pull out what you want from data. So data.sports. That way we know where it came from. All right. Anybody got any questions? Cool. So let's go back to our APIs. And this one. Does anybody have any other API they want to play with? Either Rapid or not.
I found a really fun one on Rapid API that's called WikiHow.
Okay.
That it goes out to a random WikiHow article and will return a user specified number of steps from a random article.
Gotcha.
I've played around with it a little bit, and you get some ridiculous results from it.
Of steps coming through here.
Not necessarily helpful, but fun.
So yep, same way, you can look at the required parameters. You're gonna have count of 3. If you come over here and get you a starting shell for Python, you can see in our query string, we have that count of 3, and you can pass it up however many steps you want.
Mhm.
Right. Same way with images. If you wanted to get you a random image, you can pull that out. There's a ton of different APIs out here to pull a bunch of different stuff. But say you're trying to build a let's look at this food nutrition one, right? See if it's got a free call to it. It does, free. 500 a day, bunch of money after that, right? So if I come out here to my endpoints, let's look at what endpoints we would have. There you go. You can search recipes, pull that kind of stuff off, get similar recipes. Now, a lot of times when you do like search recipes, it's probably going to be an option. Notice on the required parameters, it's a query of whatever they typed in. So you could get that from the user, then pass that query on. If we look down here in optional parameters, you could specify different types of cuisine. Now notice on this cuisine, we would want the user to have a choice or a drop down of all these Italian or, options. So you would grab all these options, throw that into a list so that they could pick from that list. So you can query back and forth. If there's cuisines you want to exclude, you could put that in here. Diet, tolerances, equipment. I'm guessing eventually we're going to get back how many can be results. Sort, you could sort by a certain amount, min, max protein. It's actually a really cool little sort tool here.
Yeah.
All right, so somebody was doing nutrition or fitness, wasn't they?
Yeah. no,
Yeah. So you could use something like this to pull out different recipes for things that you want to set limits on. And set the ranking and then offset too. So your results, a lot of time in these where you're doing big searches and it can get you a lot of results back, it's going to limit your results to like say 10. Then you have to rerun their query, but you want to pass in an offset so that it gets you the next 10 results or the next 20 results or something on down there. So you'll have to check for those as you're going through in these optional parameters as to what each one of those mean. So Rapid API just takes somebody's API and puts it in here. So it's an easy way to see. Another way of doing that, if you click on about, a lot of times you'll get their documentation out here on their actual website. And so if you go to docs and full documentation, you can see that you can see all these individual headers. So this is the API to get it, but this has all the documentation you would need for setting that. It just puts it in a different format that's probably easier to use than Rapid APIs. All right. And they're going to give you more information on how to use this stuff and a couple of different examples on how to get it coming through here. Use Rapid API to format your string to get you started. This is actually cool. I'm going to come back and play with this one later.
Yeah.
Note to self. Keep that one down. All right. So talk to me about APIs. How are you guys feeling about playing with APIs?
I think it'll be really fun once we can put it in like a GUI and like.
Yeah,
Yep. So just to give an example of what that may look like in the future, what's one that we want to play with? What's some information that you would want to put in some kind of GUI? Or that you would like to crunch? In other words, we need an idea and then we can chase the idea till the blue in the face. That's the problem with this class, right? I don't tell you what to do. You have to figure
Throw
out
out
what
an
you want to
idea. Local fishing data in Kansas, like
Perfect.
like stalking versus catch.
Okay, so let's do a little bit of research on that project. So for those that may not have caught that on the video, we are wanting to just take some notes here. All right, we want to find the local fishing data in Kansas.
Yep.
Let's limit it down to say Wilson Lake.
Sure.
Right? Wilson Lake. And see what we can get it there. Now, what's one place we can immediately go get some kind of that data?
Google. In general?
Google, but what is that probably going to take us to?
Some Wilson Lake
Like,
website.
wild-
Some Wilson Lake
wildlife
website, right?
powers, yeah.
So let's do Wilson Lake in Kansas. Right? And we get their state park website. And so from this state park website, let's see if we can get a fishing report. I know they put one out here. So. There we go. Fishing information. Okay. And you can see their latest fishing report coming out of here. And we can see how this pulls this out, right? And this is the latest piece. And maybe we want to pull this out. It'd be nice to get like, well, there you go. There's your stocking records. And if we look at the stocking records for say walleye, we can see the last time they stocked that in.
Okay.
There's some more stocking on walleye of when they did that.
Is this just for Wilson itself?
looks
This
like
is just for Wilson Lake. Yep.
I imagine Kansas State Parks probably have an entire website that have everything.
That's what this is.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
This is from Kansas Outdoors, which is their
Yeah.
department
I
of
thought
wildlife.
this was just specific to Wilson and nowhere
Looks
else.
like. Oh, interesting. So it also tells you where they came from.
Yes. So what would be interesting is that we want to get this data so that we can consume it, right?
Mhm.
There's a couple different ways we can do it. Do we want to deal with flat data or do we want to deal with dynamic data? Means that when we pull the request, do we want the latest and greatest from the website or do we want to just pull this as stock data?
I think for demonstration purposes, stock data makes it a little easier.
Okay, perfect. So as we do that, we want to somehow take this data and convert this into something that we can use in here. So let's just create a new Python file in our project here. Notice I'm doing this all inside one project, right?
Yeah.
You would create a different project for each one of these you're playing with. Just make sure that you keep all your files separate.
Yeah.
So let's call this fish data, for lack of a better term. And we dump this in and we can see if I just copied and pasted is all I did. It somewhat gives us some information that we want, but this isn't a very good way of doing that, right? So this is gonna show you the hard way to do it, and then I can show you some really sweet ways to do it, so we don't have to do it by hand. So, if we wanted to build a nice dictionary for this, we would have something like what? If we had this first instance, as it goes down, we would have our title being the impoundment, right?
Yeah.
And that impoundment is gonna be set to Cheney Reservoir for this first item. Okay. And then the next one coming down is our size. So we're gonna put our size. And that is going to be equal to fry. On down here, stocking tank, starting to look like the old Ford problem, huh?
Yeah.
It would, right? That's the whole point here, is this is gonna take forever.
A company would have some unpaid intern locked in a closet.
No lunch break till it's done.
Stocking day.
Some saltines in your thoughts.
Not even like two full sleeves, just two individual saltines from one sleeve
Let's
You
see.
share it with the house.
and a ketchup packet.
Oh, size requested. See, that's just it. When you copy this data, you want to make sure you're actually doing it correctly,
At least you
right?
got it
Just
right.
like the Ford problem, we don't want to be stealing stuff. All right, there. And by stealing stuff, I mean the people that stole it off the website that actually has the wrong stuff because somebody shorthanded.
Oh, love that.
Okay, date delivered. We should be getting some other information here. Why did I? No, hold on. Stocking date quantity. Quantity. There we go. Now I'm storing everything as strings, even the numbers, because we can always convert to integers, right? But if we store them as integers, it can sometimes throw a bunch of stuff off. So it's better if we don't do that right off the bat. Delivered. It is quantity delivered is one more thing. I'm just going to get through this first one and show that this is a pain. Let's not do it this way. Impoundment code.
Oh.
What if we generate a bunch of fake people and make them do it?
Fake Not exactly, generate a bunch of fake people. Then use those people to sign up for fake credit cards just to make all the banks freak out.
Alternative. Have you seen the guy?
You will go to jail for one.
That is
Well,
true.
what's
It is
the
a
deal?
felony, but it would be funny.
Who-
No such thing as a funny felony, man.
Your Honor, my client's is saying it's just a prank. bro.
But your honor in law.
This recording would be identified as exhibit 1.
No, did you see the guy who could?
Your Honor, you
He
were
was
not
gonna get
there,
like $1
so-
million loan for his company because he created a company that didn't exist and then convinced somebody to buy stock in it.
And the
And then
thing
he
is,
evaluated his company at 100,000 shares of stock
we
at that, right?
we have that out.
Hear me out. We're just gonna dodge
Now.
that tax evasion business.
Okay.
Negativity, we don't need.
So you can see here that it took me quite a while to build out this crazy dictionary so that you could actually get each one of these lined up with these as the keys and these as the individual values that come out, right? Not fun, right? So there's a couple different ways that we can do this. One, we have this in a table on this website. And if we actually looked at this code and we go to this table, we can see, let's find our full on table here. There, right? So we got this div, there's our table body. So in our table body, we have our TRs, which are all of our titles, right?
Mhm.
Go across there. So we can see that. It's this first one that comes through and that gives us all of our keys. So does anybody remember what we learned in Python 360 that we could do just to get this off here?
There's the web scraping thing.
The
where
web
you-
scraping
you
stuff,
can
right?
Go by element and just say like, this element, make it this, and this element.
You
make it
remember what the
this.
web scraping tool was?
Oh, I used it in mine. It was.
So you got automate the boring stuff. We go to web scraping. This is the best way for you to reference what you were talking about. And this is, which one was it? Web scraping.
If it is not directly.
All right, so the tools are gonna be web browser to go pull a website. You have requests to pull a web page. Beautiful Soup is the one that will do all the analyzing for us. So if we use a combination of Beautiful Soup here on our fancy little page to get this information out. And the reason I'm showing you this in the documentation is so you guys have a place to go look, right?
Yeah.
That's why I'm showing you the documents for all this and not just coding out. You got to know where to go reference it if you don't remember what you're doing. So if we look at this one here for this beautiful suit, we just steal this out of here, right? It gets us some structure to get us moving. So we know we're going to need something like that. We get down at the end, we're just going to scroll down and eventually we are going to see these. This was selenium, so we want to go before selenium. Don't need to use selenium for this. Okay, so here was our final code on importing this. Let's steal that out. If we go back to our stat here, we're going to call this get fish. Okay, so we want to import beautiful soup, which means we actually have to install it. I can just mouse over it, click install, and it does it. So no more pip install stuff. You can just highlight over the one you want. It'll automatically go do it. All right, so it's snipped, which means it did not copy everything out of that file. So let's snip these different pieces.
So I have a counter argument to your flooding the credit card idea, right? So,
Really hoping to avoid that conversation. I knew that was gonna go the right way.
so we can generate fake addresses, right? Creating quote unquote fake houses, further inflating the house market. And cracking that one instead.
It's already inflated, we only use.
Trying to lead it to box though, on that one.
On a counter argument, you should do both at the same time.
We're really not gonna let GameStop one up us, are we?
All right, so if we look at what this thing was doing, we needed a URL. So let's grab our URL from, now, is this the best way to do this? What would have been the better way of doing this? It's beautiful soup. What would have been the best way to go do this? ChatGPT. You know what?
Sorry.
I like it. Let's do it. Let's do it.
Oh, okay, okay.
All right.
I feel like at this point, you could have just cut out like all the middlemen.
So what I was-
You've been like, hey, give me the state information for fish and things.
So, and this is the reason I want you guys to see this. So really what I was going after is you would go look up the beautiful soup documentation, right?
Oh,
That's the best
yeah.
place to go. So if we went to beautiful soup, Python, go out to its actual documentation, which is right here.
Crummy duck.
And then you can figure out how to get started, right? So if we do a quick start, I could not get it to shrink as I'm clicking. There you go. And then you could copy and paste out the pieces you want and strip that out, right? Let's do one better with ChatGPT. So we're over here, right? And this is a real tool that you guys will use. So one, I'm going to change my plugin to turn that off. But we do want it to do advanced data analysis. Why not?
Okay.
All right. So what do we want it to do?
I've never used ChatGPT before.
All right.
This is as far as I go.
We want fish, right?
Fish.
Give me fish. I don't think that's going to do what you think it's going to do.
Fish me, bro.
So the whole point here is ChatGPT is awesome, but it's only as awesome as what you tell it to do. And you have to think about it methodically as you give it through, right? So we want to say something like this. Let's go to our website.
Yeah, so could we do like,
Which means our
Say,
job
like,
is.
go out to this website
Never figure it out.
and write a Python program that returns a dictionary such that this table is turned into a dictionary.
You got it. There you go. Now you're getting more detail as to what you want. So the best way to think about this design wise is say what like 3 times or why 3 times, meaning why am I doing this? Why am I doing that? Why am I doing that? Right. The idea behind that is so that you can formulate the right prompt in here. So we would tell ChatGPT, just start from the basics. Can you please reference the following URL for this conversation? Right? And then we do a shift enter so that we can paste it in and go through. I've learned, and I've done a lot of ChatGPT on here. I actually have to give a speech in there. But when I preference that in, what do I get?
No.
I'm sorry, I can't directly access external information, right? ChatGPT can't go out to the internet and do a bunch of stuff.
Okay.
However, it kind of can. So if I trigger this plugin for web result and I tell it open this and hit enter,
That's a wall.
Okay, so now Chat GPT just went through and said, yeah, I can pull all that information.
I can't access the internet. Here, let me show you how.
He literally.
That's it, right? So that's the whole point, is that you have to program how to get this data out of here.
That's actually. super
Now, does this make the most amount of sense for what we're trying to do?
I mean, kind of depends.
Not exactly. Kinda want the-
I mean, there's probably a faster way if we're just caring about static data. If we wanted to have it dynamic where it always pulled it, then yeah, we could probably chase this. But another way of doing this is we could just go out to the website, right? Copy and paste this in
Oh, and then.
and say, give me this as a Python dictionary, right? So let's do something like that where we turn this off. Let's do a new chat and say, can you take the following data and store it as fish? Right?
Bring back a picture.
And put fish in quotes so that it gives it a little tighter. Now, it's gonna complain that I can't store data. Ignore it. So we put in here, right? And it says, I'll store data in a pandas data frame. Ooh, it's almost like we're gonna talk about pandas data frames here soon, right?
Wow.
So it knows that it can go in and store that in there as a pandas data frame. Great. And it's working on it and saying, I don't know.
I
what.
thought it just said, yeah, I can store it in a pandas data frame, but you
Now-
don't get access to it.
It might be doing that because I have the ability for the plugin for advanced data analysis. So if you guys try this and it doesn't work, that's one thing. No, I am using Python version 4, right? Which means I pay $20 a month for ChatGPT. If you guys wanted to use the 3 free 5, let's see what it says. 3 free 5. Can you store the following information as fish?
That's when we'll drop like out of it.
It won't even do that. It'll like say, sure, and then not do anything. Okay, so it came back immediately with, it looks like you provided a data sheet relating to fish stocking activities, including various information such as impoundment name, size requested, stocking, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, that sounds great. So please note, I can't store the data beyond this conversation. They've fixed some of these prompts. So what that did was go, I basically converted that from a what? Does anybody know what kind of data this is?
No.
Roughly tabbed eliminated data, right? We can see the little spaces in here. So if we stored this as an Excel file, it would store it as tabbed eliminated. We would probably want something like comma separated, but because we're copying it out of a website, it's going to be tabbed eliminated. So what we know is this is all in here. We could say, can you convert this to a Python dictionary? Right? So then it comes in here and says, you can copy and paste this and you can spit it out. Here's how I would do it. And it stops and says the rest of this data is similar to that. And you go, no, please give me the entire table as a, or the entire data as a Python dictionary. Now, the reason I say that, and it says apologies for the misunderstanding, right? And it's going to spit it out. Now, sometimes it will do this if you just say, do it. Other times it's going to spit out on 3.5 and say, I don't have enough memory. So that's the big difference between 3.5 and 4 is the amount of request and the output of what you wanted to do.
My gosh.
That's
Right.
when you tell ChatGPT to download more RAM, obviously.
Some dude from
You need to download extra hard drive space. Let me show you.
Now, notice what we just hit. We hit that limit. In other words, it can only output where it died. And there's an output to the number of lines it can do.
Okay.
Can we just pick up from the line where it finished off? Or is it
See, there you go. I like how you're thinking. That's the whole point.
Continues iterating, but.
Roughly. So what we're gonna do is come in here to our fish data. We're now gonna get rid of everything we had and put B in here.
We got the oldest.
And notice it called it fish data. Our Python file is called fish data. That's horrible. Don't ever call it variable the same as the name because it's gonna get circular. So we call it data. And now we have a list of all these different ones, but it died its size. And yes, if we hit continue generating, it will go ahead and continue. You used to actually have to tell it pick up where you left off.
Will it delete the previous lines that we already generated, or is it?
No, it just continues on, but it can only send so much in one spit back out to you. That's how the Chat GPT model works. All right, so we left off at Mound City Lake. Let's go back to our output. And where was Mound City Lake? There we go. Size, copy this down, spit it out. And you can see when I copied and pasted that in, all of our tabbing was off. So let's tab that right. Tab. There we go. All of these tabs are now off.
What?
Yeah, you're gonna have to fix some of the formatting in this case when it tabbed it in. But look how much easier that was than dealing with everything else that we did, right? So new line, do a new line. Now we have taken all of our fish data and pulled it in. All right, now we can go ahead and build something on a website that we want to build. Maybe we want this to show up as bootstrap stuff, right? So let's go to Bootstrap, and we're jumping like way ahead in this class, but let's go to Bootstrap.
Who cares? The rules are arbitrary.
Yep, that's how I feel.
I was gonna say,
Right.
you make the rule.
So the idea is that we look at our documentation, and if anybody's played with Bootstrap, maybe you want this to be in a nice
I think it's
so Bootstrap is just a JavaScript front end for websites that allows you to build things quickly and
Oh, so
stuff like that.
like autocomplete, but with a fancy-
Yeah, it instead of you having designed like a modal, right? So a modal is at the top of a page, you get one of these that pop up on the screen, right?
Oh, oh.
Instead of you having to design that, it has all the JavaScript and the HTML
Oh,
for it.
that's super.
You just copy and paste it in. What was nice is we may want to do something like a table, right? And you can have these nice clean tables it generates, or maybe one that's color charted, something like that as it goes through. So we would build a web application that would be able to display this data. The whole point of this, as your question was, is now I have this data stored in a Python file. I need to build a web application to display this really coolly. So real quick, what we would do is go File, New Project. Let's start with, say, Flask, because this is going to be a pretty generic one. Let's dump that in here. And let it generate us a new program. For those that are watching this video later on, again, we're jumping way beyond what we're doing. The original question is now we have this data, can we build a web application? And that is what we're going to do when we get to the Flask stuff. But I want to give you a preview of how we would go about doing that, or where we're leading up to. So if we go in here, you can see this is a main app file. I won't go into detail because we'll do that in our project. But if I hit play, that's going to give me a link on my local web server, and I get this hello world, right? So if I go back to my app, we can see here is our def hello world, and it just returns this as text. We want to format this in some way for a screen or a template, right? So let's go back to ChatGPT, because we're going to cheat, and we already have this in ChatGPT, right? Let's do something like a new chat, and we have 3.5, and we could say, can you build a Flask application that will take a list of dictionaries and display them on the screen using Bootstrap 5. And it will literally build all this out for you, right?
Well,
Now,
shucks.
in some cases, it's going to try it and it's going to say, maybe on there, right? So we know we need to pip install Flask. So let's go back to our program. We need to install Flask, which in this case, it did it for us because we specifically said we were building a Flask application.
Yeah.
So it automatically put that in for us. All right, that step's done. Now we need to create our app.py, which we already had. So we're just going to copy this over it. That's this one here. And we want to stop our server from running up here. All right. We copied that in. We need to create a folder called templates, and we need to create a website called index.html. So let's go here, go in. We already have a templates folder, new HTML file. And what was it called? Index, right? So index, and then we paste this in. And this example sets it all up, right? So this did it. That's cool, but we just told it to take the information from a dictionary and go, right? It's not connected to our dictionary. So if we go and look at this template, it's coming in and it says for item and data list. Then we're going to put item.name, item.age, and it's going to build out a table. If we hit play, and it builds out our website, and now we see this nice little dictionary list that it gave us, right? So we have a name and an age, and then it has all the data that's inside of there. If we go back to our code and out to our app, we have this cool little data list here, right? And this has our name and our age and everything we want to pull out of it. So for us to use our fish data, we're now going to need to pull in our fish data on this page. So if we go out here to Python, new Python file, we're going to call it data. Just keep it simple. We need to paste back in our data that we had. So let's go back to ChatGPT, fish stocking data. Let's copy this whole thing out of here. Yeah, over here on the left will be your old one. Now, if you try to go to a new one and say reference that, it cannot do it. So it's always better to
Not yet.
don't get rid of your stuff over here, right? All right. Let's see here. What's I doing here? All right, paste this in. So we have a fish data with all our stuff. We go back to our app. We can say from data import fish data. Right, instead of data list, we're going to call this our fish data. Okay. Down here in our render template, notice that data list is now equal to fish data. Okay. And that's going to send it on. Then we go over here back to our template, and that is going to be bringing it in as our data list, right? So what that did was tie those two together. Again, we're going to talk about this in Flask.
So now we run it and it's just.
Right. So it's going to pull in and it's going to look for an item, but it's specifically looking for item.name and item.age. If we look at our data, we don't have that. We have item dot
Those.
everything, you know, whatever we want. So if we want to grab impoundment,
So the item dot species instead of name.
right, we would say something like item dot impoundment and item dot
Species, second from the bottom.
species. Let's grab that one. That is not what I wanted. Okay. Here. And then at this title up at the top, we want the same thing. So we would say impoundment. And for this one, we would say species. Let's see what we get. It's probably going to break. That's okay. We run it, we see our page,
Well, look at
or
that.
maybe it doesn't, right?
That's a whole lot of walls.
So it pulled all this up and the way that we wanted to pull the impoundment. Now, notice even on this website, I had to code each one of these as it goes through, right?
Yeah.
We can make it loop through each one of those, put it into a dictionary of all headings, then tell it to loop through that and spit out each line for a heading, then spit out each line for the individual data.
Wow. That's impressive.
But now we have a whole website that has all this built into it. And if we wanted to do cool stuff like maybe a sort filter list on this,
Yeah.
we could build a sort filter list on this table. So if we come back out here to Bootstrap and we have this table, right? We could stripe the table. We could
Oh
hover.
my gosh.
We can do all this, and maybe we want to search or do some of that. That is in here. You just have to find it.
Oh shit.
Active tables, right? Then we could do an active table. There's a way to search through the table here. There we go. Always responsive tables. You could set all this stuff up. Now, when I told this in this page to use Bootstrap, it automatically pulled in the Bootstrap heading and all that kind of stuff in there for me. This is all stuff that you guys will do manual in your projects. So long story short, you can do some really cool stuff really, really fast, right?
Yeah.
And the idea is once you pull in your data, we'll use things like Streamlit, which you'll use NumPy and SciPy to do data analysis on something, right?
Okay.
And then you'll use Streamlit to give you charts and graphs and pull out all sorts of cool stuff. All starts with an API, right?
Yeah.
So we didn't have an API for fish. We just pulled the straight data. Maybe there's a way that we could use an API to do that. So
So-
fish data.
In
Fish.
theory, that kind of became an API, sort of. Like,
Exactly.
We went out, interacted with the data, spit it out, and then we processed it.
Right. So we could host our own website that has an API like this that would spit that data back out. And that's where you use like a REST API framework.
I see.
But like here, we could probably find some fish stocking data if there was an API for it.
Yeah.
If not, there may be just a bunch of data and we got to pull that out. So
Cool. All right.
How'd we do today? Blow some minds?
Oh, yeah.
Please don't go play with Python Faker and blow some stuff up tonight. I know what's going through all your heads.
Just check his post.
Yeah, I was gonna say. Professor Zeller showed me how to, no, don't do that. Don't do that.
Professor Zella, and then your office number, your email.
Yeah.
I'm already on my.
All right.
Hear me out. It's all, it's like you, but we just use
So-
Baker to generate